The marble floors of the Princeton Law School reception reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers overhead. Conversations buzzed with prestige. Judges, partners, donors, and rising legal stars mingled effortlessly. I stood quietly near the edge of the room in a modest navy suit, watching catering staff move quickly between clusters of influential guests. First time working this event? A server named Maria asked kindly, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. The Blackwell family can be intense. I smiled faintly. I've heard. Before I continue, I'd love to know something. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? If this story is resonating with you, take a moment to subscribe. These stories are about truth, growth, and the moments that change us, and there are many more coming. Gentle nod. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. My son, James, was graduating at the top of his class tonight. He'd earned every accolade through relentless effort, not inherited connections. His girlfriend, Catherine Blackwell, came from a different world entirely. Old money, old influence, and an unspoken belief that status determined value. The kitchen behind the reception doors was chaos. In the center stood Catherine, her designer dress immaculate, her voice sharp as she scolded a trembling staff member. The justices asked for chilled water, not lukewarm. This is unacceptable. I stepped closer. Is there a problem? Catherine turned, scanning me quickly before her expression hardened. Who are you? You're not dressed for the reception. Sarah Martinez, James's mother. Recognition flickered, then vanished beneath a polite but unmistakable layer of dismissal. Oh, right. James mentioned you might arrive early to help. She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. I assumed I'd be joining my son in greeting the guests, I replied calmly. Before she could answer, Richard Blackwell strode in, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. I recognized him instantly, managing partner at one of the most powerful firms in New York. I'd seen him many times, usually across a courtroom. Catherine, he said briskly, Justice Williams just arrived. His gaze landed on me. And you are? James's mother, I said again. Ah, yes, from where was it? He asked, already waving a hand dismissively. The Bronx, I replied. He nodded, misunderstanding entirely. Right, well, we've arranged for staff and family to remain in the kitchen during the main reception. Best not to overwhelm the justices. James's voice cut through the tension. Mom, he stood in the doorway, graduation robes still on, eyes darkening as he took in the scene. Catherine rushed to his side. I was just helping your mother get settled, she said quickly. James frowned. We talked about this, Catherine. It's fine, I said softly, meeting his eyes. He recognized that look, the one I used in court when I'd already reached a verdict. Richard adjusted his tie. Given your background, we thought you'd be more comfortable here. I smiled faintly. Perhaps we should focus on the reception. I believe Justice Williams was discussing last month's corporate accountability ruling. At that exact moment, a familiar voice echoed through the doors. Where's Judge Martinez? I was hoping to congratulate her personally. The kitchen went silent, and every assumption in that room was about to collapse. They thought they'd placed me where I belonged, but in seconds, they were about to realize they just insulted the judge who could change their futures forever. The silence in the kitchen was almost ceremonial. A young clerk leaned in through the doorway, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Lee. Judge Martinez? Justice Williams is asking for you. He'd like your thoughts on the updated corporate fraud guidelines. Catherine's face drained of color. Richard Blackwell froze mid-breath. I smoothed the sleeve of my blazer and stepped forward. I'll be right there. Catherine finally found her voice. Judge Martinez? Yes, I said gently. Federal Judge Sarah Martinez. I offered a small smile. Though I appreciate your concern about whether I'd be able to converse with Supreme Court justices, I seem to manage it fairly often. Richard's confident posture collapsed in real time. But you said the Bronx. I did, I replied. That's where I began. I just didn't stop there. James said nothing, but the quiet pride in his eyes spoke louder than words. I started in the Bronx courts over 20 years ago, I continued calmly. I later became the youngest federal judge appointed to the Second Circuit. Your firm appears before me regularly, Mr. Blackwell, though I notice you often send junior partners. A faint murmur rippled through the nearby staff who had paused to watch. Catherine stared at the floor. You let us think you were staff? I raised an eyebrow. No, you assumed. I paused. There's a difference. Without waiting for a response, I turned toward the reception hall. As I passed, Maria, the server Catherine had scolded earlier, caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod. I returned it, already planning to follow up on her daughter's internship application. Justice Williams greeted me warmly the moment I entered the room. Sarah, that opinion you wrote last month, brilliant, completely reframed corporate liability. Thank you, Bill. Some of that insight came from my early days working nights as a courthouse janitor while I was in law school. Around us, heads nodded appreciatively. Behind me, I could practically feel the Blackwells shrinking. Over the next hour, the room shifted. Conversations adjusted. Introductions changed. Richard Blackwell, once the center of attention, now wiped sweat from his brow as colleagues connected the dots. His future daughter-in-law's mother was the very judge whose rulings he'd been actively sidestepping. A senior partner from Richard's firm approached me, glass trembling slightly. Judge Martinez, we had no idea you were James's mother. Richard's been modest. Has he? I said mildly. Across the room, Catherine hovered at the edge of conversations, watching her carefully curated social circle realign itself without her permission. The same people who once ignored James now competed for his attention. James, Catherine finally said, gripping his arm, I need to explain. Explain what? Asked James quietly. How you told your friends my mother was embarrassing, or how you suggested I distance myself from my background. I didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't know, and you didn't think it mattered. Maria passed by again, her presence unmistakable now. Catherine flinched as recognition set in. James, please, she said, we can fix this. Fix what? Another voice cut in sharply. Margaret Blackwell stepped forward, eyes calculating. Catherine, we need to talk. Half the judges here have already heard about the kitchen incident. I turned slowly to face them both. Perhaps, I said calmly, we should have that conversation somewhere private. And as they followed me toward the donors' lounge, I knew the hardest lesson was only just beginning. They thought the humiliation was over, but what waited behind closed doors would force them to confront something far more uncomfortable than embarrassment, the truth about who they were. The donors' lounge was quiet, insulated from the polite laughter and clinking glasses outside. Plush leather chairs lined the walls, the kind of room designed for powerful people to speak freely, usually without consequence. Margaret Blackwell wasted no time. Judge Martinez, she began smoothly, surely we can come to some kind of understanding. My husband's firm has several important cases pending in your court. The air shifted instantly. Are you attempting to negotiate with a federal judge? I asked calmly. Both Margaret and Catherine stiffened. Of course not, Margaret said quickly. I only meant— You never mean it, I interrupted gently. That's the problem. You never mean to judge people by their clothes. You never mean to belittle service staff. You never mean to teach your daughter that worth is measured by proximity to power." Catherine sank into a chair, her confidence unraveling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I truly am." I took a seat across from her. An apology matters, but only if it's the beginning, not the end. Margaret remained standing, her hands clasped tightly. "Then what do you want from us?" I smiled slightly. "Want, Mrs. Blackwell? I have everything I could want. A career I earned, a son I'm proud of, the peace that comes from knowing I didn't step on anyone to get here." I turned to Catherine. "The real question is, what do you want?" She looked up, mascara smudged, voice unsteady. "I don't know anymore." "Do you want to keep believing respect comes from last names and labels?" I asked. "Or do you want to learn what real character looks like?" Margaret started to object, but Catherine spoke first. "You want me to earn it," she said slowly, "like James does, like you did." I nodded. "My first job was cleaning courtrooms at night. You'd be surprised how much you learn when people think you're invisible. The person emptying your trash might be studying for the bar. The server you snap at might be raising the next great attorney." Catherine swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "For starters, the Legal Aid Society always needs volunteers, and the courthouse daycare could use reading tutors for children whose parents can't afford childcare during trials." Margaret gasped. "That's not appropriate." "I'll do it," Catherine said firmly. "Both." She stood straighter. "And I'll apologize to Maria and the rest of the staff, properly." Margaret looked stunned. "Catherine!" "No," Catherine said, meeting her mother's eyes. "I've been awful, all of us have, and if I want to deserve someone like James, I need to become someone worthy of respect, not someone who demands it." As we returned to the reception, Catherine walked directly to Maria and asked for a moment. The apology wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. James appeared beside me. "You're giving her another chance?" "I'm giving her an opportunity," I corrected. "What she does with it is up to her." "And her father's cases?" he asked quietly. "They'll be handled impartially, as always." I paused. "Though he may find himself spending more time on pro bono work." As the night wound down, I watched Catherine help clear glasses, her designer dress wrinkled, her smile genuine for the first time. Some judgments aren't made from the bench. 3 months later, Catherine Blackwell walked into my chambers, and the woman standing before me was almost unrecognizable. 3 months after the reception, I was reviewing case files in my chambers when my clerk announced an unexpected visitor. "Catherine Blackwell is here to see you." I looked up, curious. "Send her in." The woman who stepped through the door barely resembled the one who'd tried to hide me in a kitchen. The designer labels were gone, her hair was pulled back simply, her blazer was practical, her hands marked with faint calluses, the kind earned, not styled. "Judge Martinez," she began, then paused. "Sarah, if that's okay." "It is," I said, gesturing for her to sit. She placed a thin folder on my desk. Inside were handwritten thank you notes, crayon drawings, and photos. Catherine sat cross-legged on courthouse floors, helping children with homework while their parents attended hearings. "I've been reading at the courthouse daycare in the mornings," she said, "and volunteering with legal aid in the afternoons." I flipped through the pages slowly. "Maria's daughter was accepted to law school," Catherine continued quietly. "I helped her study for the LSAT between shifts. She's incredible. She just needed someone to believe in her." I nodded, noticing the quiet confidence that had replaced her polished social armor. "And your father?" Catherine let out a soft laugh. "He's adjusting. You assigned him to pro bono cases, didn't you?" "I may have suggested it." "He helped a homeless veteran recover his pension last month," she said. "He came home more excited than I've ever seen him, and there wasn't a billable hour attached." "And your mother?" She joined the daycare's fundraising committee, Catherine smiled, though she insists on teaching table manners alongside reading lessons. I closed the folder. And you? What are you finding in all of this? Catherine's expression grew serious. Purpose, real connection. The kids don't care about my last name or what I wear. They care that I show up. And James? Her voice softened. He was right to be disappointed that night, but now he's proud, not because I'm trying to impress you, but because I'm becoming someone he can respect. I studied her carefully. The entitlement was gone. In its place was accountability. My old friends think I've lost my mind, she admitted. They say I'm slumming it. And what do you think? I asked. For the first time, she said, I don't care what they think. I smiled. Because you've learned what really matters. No, she corrected gently. I've learned who really matters. The parents working double shifts, the courthouse staff no one thanks, the public defenders carrying impossible caseloads. I leaned back, remembering my own path. What's next? I applied to become a public defender, she said. My father nearly fainted. He already had an office waiting for me at his firm. I may have suggested it. He helped a homeless veteran recover his pension last month, she said. He came home more excited than I've ever seen him, and there wasn't a billable hour attached. As Catherine stood to leave, James appeared at my doorway, grinning. She told me she was coming. He added, she wanted you to know the lesson stuck. No, I said, gathering my files. She's still learning. And that, I knew, was the real victory. But the story didn't end there, because sometimes the biggest lessons don't stay in the past. They follow you forward. James and I walked through the courthouse corridors later that afternoon, the familiar echo of footsteps surrounding us. Law students studied quietly in the library, clerks rushed between chambers, and the quiet machinery of justice moved forward as it always had. Near the windows, Maria's daughter sat with a stack of law books, highlighting notes with fierce concentration. She looked up and smiled when she saw us. That smile alone felt like a verdict worth celebrating. Ready for lunch? James asked. I nodded, always. As we stepped outside, he glanced at me. Do you think Catherine's really changed? She's changing, I corrected. That's more important. Change that lasts isn't instant. It's chosen again and again. He smiled. She told me something interesting last night. Oh? She said that night in the kitchen was the worst moment of her life. And, I asked, and also the most important. We sat at a small cafe across the street, nothing fancy. I ordered black coffee, James ordered whatever the barista recommended. Some habits die hard. She said she finally understood something, he continued, that power isn't about who serves you, it's about who you serve. I smiled into my cup. That realization took me years. You never told me much about your early days, he said. I shrugged lightly. They weren't glamorous. I cleaned courtrooms at night, scrubbed floors where arguments were made during the day, but I learned more there than I ever did in lecture halls. Like what? That dignity doesn't come from titles, I said, and that the law touches everyone, especially those people tend to overlook. James nodded, thoughtful. A week later, Catherine sent me a handwritten note. No letterhead, no embellishment, just gratitude, and a quiet promise to keep doing the work, even when no one was watching. Months passed. Richard Blackwell's firm continued appearing in my courtroom. He no longer sent junior partners to argue cases he found inconvenient. Margaret became a regular presence at daycare fundraisers. Catherine began her public defender internship, working longer hours for less pay and sleeping better than she ever had. One afternoon, a clerk asked me, "Do you ever regret not confronting people sooner?" I considered the question carefully. No, I said, people don't change because they're exposed. They change because they're given a mirror and a choice. That evening, as I removed my robes, I thought back to that law school kitchen, to the assumptions, the dismissals, the moment I was placed where others believed I belonged, and how quickly the truth dismantled their certainty. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about correction. Sometimes it's about showing someone the weight of their own actions and trusting them to carry it forward. James met me at the door. Same place tomorrow? I smiled. Wouldn't miss it. As we walked out together, I realized something I'd learned long before I ever took the bench. The most powerful judgments aren't written in opinions or handed down from elevated seats. They happen quietly, when someone finally understands that worth has nothing to do with status and everything to do with how you treat the people who stand beside you. And sometimes, the biggest changes begin in the smallest places. Because the true measure of a person isn't where they're seated at the table, but how they treat those serving it.